Okay, so today we are talking about the pre-listing packet, which I think is just as important as the listing packet itself. We'll kind of go over the difference between the two of those, why you do it, what it does, the precedent it sets, all that. So last week we focused on the listing contract itself, which is really how we start out this series. We're entering the listing series. So we talked about buyers in past months. Like now we're really going to be talking a lot about sellers, how to work with sellers, what important conversations you need to have with sellers are, really everything regarding sellers and that listing contract. So we talked about the listing contract last week and really how to talk about the listing process with a seller depending on what their disc profile is. So it's really important to know who your seller is and what's important to them, because if you come across the wrong way, they might not truly hear what you're saying, because the way you say something is usually more important than what you're actually saying. So we went through that and we kind of know how to set those up. And today, like I said, we're going to talk about the pre-listing packet. So what you are getting ready before you actually go to the listing appointment. So the pre-listing packet is something you're going to be dropping off before you actually go into the listing. So I know, Andy, you were kind of putting one of these together the other day. And really what it does is it shows the seller that you are ready to go. You've done research on their home. They know what to expect. And then I also want to talk about actually putting together the documents that you need for a listing appointment. There is no right or wrong when it comes to this stuff, but there's stuff that I think is important to have every single time. So we'll go through that. You do have homework this week. Anyone who's watching, which I know a few like non-licensed people are watching or will be watching this recording, you do not need to do a pre-listing packet. So only those who are licensed and officially like in the class will have this homework. And your homework is creating your own pre-listing packet. And that's something you can have in Canva and just save and have it ready to go. One thing that I like to do is then go put it into the transaction management system so you can pull it every time you have a listing and just throw it into your documents that you already have. But we're going to go through what to really put in that pre-listing packet. So I am going to go into Canva, and I think Canva is kind of the easiest place to keep this stuff. Andy, what did you put in your pre-listing packet?
Oh, I have the timeline, just a generic first page, like let's sell your house type thing with contact information and a picture. Timeline, then there is, I gotta look. Then going out of order, it's got, hang on one second, I'll show you. I'll tell you. Oops. Timeline, the seller information sheet, which is a couple pages, then the mortgage information for the house, all about your home, that page with, the ages of your furnace, roof, AC, etc., oven range, everything. 3 pages there. The seller update. So I have that one I made. It's the item updated. So it could be roof, furnace, whatever. And then the year updated right next to it. And then the showing instructions, which I just used the ones we had.
Yep. So I usually like to pretty much bring almost everything that I'm going to bring to the listing appointment, minus one thing. Well, 2 things actually. I don't bring comps, and I don't put comps in the pre-listing packet, and I don't put the listing contract in the packet, because we want the packet to be fun. And while those conversations are still fun, you really don't want to send the wrong message by putting comps in there and not being with them to explain what the comps mean and how we can use them to our advantage. So you want to give them enough to begin looking through and see that you've really prepared for the listing appointment, but you don't want to put too much. So you're really going to include everything except the listing contract and comps. So I'm going to share my screen, and I want to show you guys, and I'm going to download and send this to you after class so you can use it as your own template. But this is kind of like the front page cover guide of what I would put in my pre-listing packet. As you do your first few, what I want to share is that there's a saying that is really helpful when it comes to this: done is better than perfect. For a long time, I did not do pre-listing packets before listing appointments because I felt like it wasn't perfect. And I felt like it wasn't fancy enough or put together enough. I wanted like a big fancy box with like a mug with our logo on it and all that kind of stuff, until I finally realized like I was never going to do it if I didn't just start putting something together. So in the beginning, it is okay if you drop off a manila envelope with this stuff paper clipped together. It can get fancier and cooler, and you can put more tchotchkes and pens and coffee mugs and things that you want over time. But right now in the beginning, just do it, and it will get better and better and better. But it will never get better if you don't do it in a very normal way to begin with. And I say that speaking from experience because I avoided putting them together for so long because I didn't think they were cool enough or pretty enough. So what we've got here, this is kind of the cover page. It says inside, you will find some documents to get started. This is probably like my favorite page because it seems like it's very official, right? What do we always tell you whenever you're new? A lot of people feel like, well, I can't book an appointment with anyone because I don't know what I'm doing. Quite the opposite. Go out there and you book appointments. Set appointments, get them on the calendar, send calendar invites, book appointments. We will figure it out from there. We can teach you this stuff very quickly and go on appointments with you and get you set up, but we have nothing to get set up for if you don't have an appointment. So book the appointment. If there's nothing else running in your mind, in the back of your head all day, every day, book the appointment, book the appointment. Your entire real estate business is based on booking appointments. So it says inside this packet, you will find a few helpful pieces to get started on the listing process. We can't wait to meet with you at our appointment. So a picture of who they're meeting with, their information, and the time. Right there, like this looks official, right? Like already to that seller, if they're interviewing other agents as well, this is something they're not getting from anybody else. So this really shows like we're taking your appointment seriously. We are excited to meet with you, and we obviously prepped for this appointment. If this is what we put before the appointment, imagine how important the actual appointment is going to be. What are we going over in our session? It says we take great care in giving your home all of the attention it deserves, and we'll do market research to prep for the appointment. We consistently sell homes for the most money and invest in strategic marketing tools to net you the most money. We know that your home is a huge asset, and it is our responsibility to help you get the most money from it. We are so grateful for this opportunity. Let's get started. So what are we going to go over? It helps for a seller. Most people want to know, like, what is this appointment about? What are we going to talk about? Getting that expectation set up front is very helpful because now they know what to expect and feel maybe less slimy about it. Sometimes people feel like meeting with an agent is going to be salesy and slimy, and it's not. We are not salespeople. We're really here to consult and educate and guide you through the process. That's truly why we're here. We're not selling you anything. So what are we going to go over? Well, in our meeting, we're going to go over market statistics and what has been happening in your local market. So we'll tell that story. What's been happening in your neighborhood? And as we have talked about, you better be the expert in that local neighborhood, because if you're not, and they tell you about Betty down the street who sold her house for X amount of money, if you don't know what that person's talking about, you're going to look really unprepared in front of the seller. So you especially need to know what's been going on specifically in their neighborhood. And I always encourage you to show up early, drive around the neighborhood, see if there's any for sale by owner signs in the yard, get familiar with what's going on so that you are truly the expert in the neighborhood. There's nothing worse than showing up to a listing appointment, feeling unprepared, not knowing the neighborhood. How helpful are you really then? They're hiring you for your expertise, for your interpretation of what's going on in the market, and it's hard to interpret information that you don't know. So you do really need to do your homework. Next time in our next class, we're going to be talking about pricing a listing and becoming an expert in the neighborhood. So that's what we'll talk about more next time. We're going to talk about your goals and timeline. What's important to the seller? The questions we ask over and over again. Where are you going and when do you need to be there? Why are you going there? Okay, well, once we find out their motivation, we can continue to go back to that. You want to move to Arizona in September because you got a new job. Great. So now when things are getting tough, we're in the listing, inspections going on, things are getting dicey, you can continue to go back to that. Okay, we're going to get through inspection. and it's going to go really smoothly because we've got to get you to Arizona for your new job, or we've got to get you to New Berlin to live by your grandkids. Whatever their motivation is, that's what we're going to keep going back to. So in this meeting, that's really when you find out what is important to that seller, where they're going, and when they need to be there. Talk about that. Ask them those questions. Why are they selling? Their answer might be, you know what? I heard the market's good. I just want to see what happens. That could always, that is a reason to sell as well. But now you know. And it's really important as well because buyer agents, those who do call you during the listing and ask you questions about your listing, are going to ask typically, why are they selling? What's important to the seller? What are they looking for in an offer? And you only know those answers if you ask those questions. We're going to discuss pricing of your home. As you guys know, we do not invent pricing. We will never walk into a listing, and if a seller ever asks you, what do you think my house will sell for? I don't think anything. Our job is to interpret market data. So we actually do a lot of research and look at what's happening. What are the psychological indicators in that neighborhood? What have we been seeing? Are houses going in 2 days, or are they going in 2 months? What kind of houses in this neighborhood are selling the quickest? Why? What story is this neighborhood telling? What's the highest price this neighborhood has ever seen? Remember, you can build the Taj Mahal in a $250,000 neighborhood, and you still can't go too much higher over 250 because that neighborhood doesn't support it. So we're going to talk through that and what that looks like and help a seller understand why we want to price in a certain way. That conversation is always a little bit different based on the market that we're in, but no matter what, we always want to correctly price the home, not too high, not too low. We always want to be really in that sweet spot because when a house is priced too high, remember what happens? No one looks at it because they think, oh, it's overpriced. If it's priced too low, people think something's wrong with it. Either way, you end up with a situation that's not ideal for your seller. We're going to discuss the marketing tools that we're going to use to promote your home and get the most buyers to see it. And we'll talk through what the marketing plan is. Now, your marketing plan will differ, but we'll talk about, maybe here's the open houses that we're going to have. We're going to have a VIP neighbor open house on Friday from 4 to 5. We're going to invite all your neighbors to come in, have some champagne, tell them that they get to choose their neighbors, bring their friends, right? And have that actually be a fun event for them. And then have an actual open house from 5 to 7. Maybe we'll do our open house on Saturday and Sunday. And then from there, possibly look through offers or discuss then next steps, but kind of going through timeline wise, what that seller can now expect. Your house, it is going to show up on MLS, of course, which is what 90% of buyers are using, especially if they're working with an agent. Your house is going to show up on Realtor, Trulia, Zillow. It's going to show up on all of those websites. We're going to promote it on social media. Maybe we'll do a fun video about it. We're going to get that listing out and talk about the best features of the home so that people know why they want to live here. Maybe we're going to stage the property because it's empty and we really find that it's going to be helpful to show a buyer where they could arrange furniture in the house because buyers sometimes can't see past that. Maybe we're just going to move some stuff around that they have because the furniture in the house is really updated already. So it just depends. Every house is different. You're going to know kind of that low, mid, and high tier price before you walk into the listing. And you're kind of going to mentally figure out what that price should be when you're in the listing. So you're going to be able to know what that house is probably going to sell for before you ever step foot in the house. And I'm going to teach you how to do that next time. But you won't know exactly what the dollar amount is until you get there, if it's the low, mid, or high tier price. We'll talk more about that. We'll discuss the timeline together and discuss the prep process. So a lot of times what I find is that we work backwards in a listing appointment. So we start with, okay, when do you need to be in Phoenix? Great, on this day. Well, we know that a sale typically is going to take 45 to 60 days from the time we go live, right? So let's go 60 days back, okay? Now let's say we need a week to prep stage. Maybe they want to do some painting, and we're going to kind of work backwards from that timeline. Sometimes when you end up with the date, we're like, oh, we should be listing today or yesterday. And that's typically the case because people don't always think out ahead. You need a good probably 60 days or so of prep time, photo time, staging time, listing time. Maybe it doesn't sell right away. Now we get an accepted offer. Now we go through inspection. Now we go through appraisal. Now we schedule closing. Oops, closing got pushed back a few days. So we need, I'd say 60 days is kind of that minimum to do all of that. From the moment I'm sitting in this chair talking to you, seller, to the day that you are closed and packing up to go where you need to go. About 60 days, depending on, what that looks like and what work needs to be done and how they want to prep. So always work backwards from their timeline, and almost always you find that, okay, we need to get listed very soon. There's nothing better sitting in a listing appointment than when you realize, okay, you have 21 days to get everything ready. You can actually schedule photos and schedule the stager and not feel rushed, which is really nice. So we always want to try and be able to schedule things out, but sometimes timelines just don't match up, and maybe they didn't call you until this week and they didn't realize how long it would take. So whatever it is, we can work with it. We just want to make sure that we're honoring their timeline and getting them where they need to go by when they need to be there, and not over promising expectations. We always want to be real with them. Never ever promise you can do something quicker than you can't, because now you have an upset seller and you're not meeting expectations. You're going to review any suggestions that your agent has to get the home ready. So usually you're going to walk through with them, go through suggestions. If you find that you think it needs to be staged, you're going to schedule the stager to come in. A lot of times, if I know that I'm going to be staging the house, I will schedule the stager to arrive about 30 minutes after me so that I can talk with the seller, discuss, and then have the stager come in and do that process. Sometimes we'll have the stager come in first and then have them go through, give their suggestions. They'll email over a report, and then I'll sit with the seller and we'll go through next steps. So that's always nice when you can schedule it at the same time, but it doesn't always turn out that way. Then we get to work. So this is kind of just an overview of what we're going to go over in the appointment. So now the sellers read this and they feel good about knowing what's going to happen next. They know what to expect. You also know what you've told the seller you're going to go over, which helps you kind of create that checklist of things you want to touch base on as well. Any questions on this?
Yeah. For the timeline. So if they have to be in Phoenix for it by a certain date, and it's 60 days or more out, or even longer, maybe it's 90 days out. How much buffer room can you schedule for yourself, or should you start the process now and give them, they can be there 20 days early or something, or because you don't want to have them out of their house too early and not be able to get into the place that they're going. So
that's something you can talk about with the seller in regards to post-closing occupancy. It's very common for a seller, let's say, who doesn't need to leave until September 30th. We'll always encourage, let's get your house on the market. The buffer, as far as the maximum amount of time for post-closing occupancy, typically to a lender, is 60 days. So what that means is that you typically cannot write into the offer that the seller is going to be staying there more than 60 days after closing. But you can, right up front in the listing, say, and we always do a seller information sheet, seller update sheet. I can actually show you an example of what one looks like that we've done on a listing, just to make it very clear what's important to the seller and what they expect. So I'm going to pull up a past listing where I know that I did this. MLS always wants us to reset our password. I need to do that. I think I did that with this listing. So in this particular case, this seller, they knew we listed in a time period that we knew we did not have a whole lot of time, but we also knew that their new house was closing about a week after when their purchase was going to close. So what we did here is we requested right in the information, seller requests a closing date of May 28th with post-closing occupancy through June 5th. There you go. Set your expectations right there. So now any buyer who is looking at this house got this document because their agent supplied it to them because we put it in MLS, and they know seller wants to close on this date and they want to stay and do an addendum O, which we'll talk about addenda later, through June 5th. So about a week of post-closing occupancy. We made it very clear that is what the seller needed.
got it.
And that's always helpful to know. I always put everything we want a seller to get or we want to convey, we always put it in MLS. Why not be clear about what we want and what's important? We also obviously listed all of the updates because they wanted to make sure to share that. So that's something we definitely do. But I want to share in here what I all put in a pre-listing packet. There is a lot here, okay? So not only do I leave it at pre-listing, I also bring it to the listing appointment. So this right here is a really good checklist of the things you want to bring. So we've got showing information, okay? So this document here is rules and stuff that they need to know about showings. Don't cook before a showing, turn all the lights on, don't have like a Glade plug-in kind of thing. So if we look, it's kind of just a list of rules and things that they need to know before a showing. And I always like to put this in the pre-listing packet so they know what to expect. They know then how open houses work, how private showings work. Not every seller knows that at a private showing, it's going to be the buyer agent with the buyer, not me. Now, maybe they request that they do want me there because it's a home that they just find that that's important. This gets that conversation going though. So again, setting expectations is the name of the game, letting them know here's what to expect. So we have showing information, listing photo preparation. This is information that we're sharing with them. Here's how you get ready for listing photos. Here's what you need to do. Here's the checklist. A listing timeline. This tells them kind of day one, here's what we do. Day three, here's what we do. And I'll send this all to you guys too. The difference. This packet is also in here. It's information about how we stage, how we list, what's important to us, how we get a listing ready. So it's kind of like our information about how we list a home. So it's how we set your home apart from the competition to put more money in your pocket. So it's got information about photography and staging. It's got a story about a buyer or a seller who didn't want to stage at first and ended up staging and made a lot more money. So we like to give real life examples, how we price, and then information about the actual net proceeds of the home. So again, this page is something I do not include in the pre-listing packet because I don't like to talk money until I'm physically with them, but I do like to show them this information. So I basically print every pages 1 through 7 of this, but not page 8, because on page 8, I have, here's what you're going to make if you use another firm. Here's what you're going to make if you use our firm. And this is how we really have that conversation that's not wrapped around commission or the price of staging or the price of doing some cosmetic repairs. We care about this number, how much they're going to make at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, with us, you can make about over 100 grand more. That sounds good. Let's do that. And they focus less on the actual cost of it. So we really like to focus on these numbers, not these numbers. Okay. What else? I've got Brookfield stats. So these we pull right out of MLS. So I like to grab these because they make you just look really smart, I think. So if we go into MLS, oh, we're in MLS right here. You're going to go back to the home page. You're going to go to the MLS homepage here, which is just, once it loads, you'll be able to see, metromls.com. Go to MLS, statistics. And then the monthly local reports. Right here. What this does is it downloads you a zip drive, and then you can grab whatever local area that you're going on an appointment in. These are good to have just for information. If you want to print out a bunch, if you spend a lot of time in, Oak Creek and you just want to have them, it's something you can always print out and give to people. So you can grab whatever you're looking for. So in this case, I was in Brookfield. So you grab the Brookfield information here. And then it's just a nice report about how quickly homes are selling, new listings, closed sales, median sale price, 33% more sales year over year. May 21 to 22, how many closed sales there were, median sale price, percent of original list price received. This is insane. Brookfield Elm Grove is at 105.6% for May. That means on average, a house is selling for 5.6% more than list price. That's honestly one of the highest I've ever seen, because there's always homes that sell for more, but when the average is 105%, that is a lot. Days on market until sale, the average is 11. That's typically like list date to pending. Pending is kind of when I think they stop that clock. And then inventory. So inventory is down. Condos down 20%. So makes it, so if we're talking to a condo seller, this is great information to know. Inventory in condos is really, really low. Now is a great time to sell. So it just gives you stats to go over. And this is information that is free to you, just as a member of the National Association of Realtors, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, and the Greater Milwaukee Association of Realtors. So I always bring that. And again, these are all documents I prep and put into my transaction before the appointment, because then at the appointment, I just need to hit print and print all this stuff again. I always bring it again in the event that they threw it away or don't have it anymore. RPR report, you guys all have access to narrpr.com just by being an agent. The one thing you need is your NRDS ID, which is something you can always ask the GMAR for if you don't have it. Or every time you get those magazines from the WRA, your NRDS ID is on it. The RPR report gives you a really nice seller's report, and we're going to go more into pricing next time, so I don't want to spend too much time on pricing. But this report is really, really helpful for a seller to see what's going on in their neighborhood and give them a really nice overview of what RPR thinks their home is worth. I always do my MLS listing first, or pricing first, and then I double check it with RPR to see if I'm on track. It's usually in the ballpark, but I refined it based on, it didn't have the bed bath information correctly, so I went in and adjusted some things. But it gives you all the information that you will need about the property. It also pulls historical data, tax records. You find out how much they owe on the property. It's all in there. So RPR is super helpful. As you can see, it gives you 70 pages. So I like to email them the document after the listing, but I only bring usually pages like 1 through 8 to the appointment, because printing 70 pages is kind of redundant. And frankly, they don't need the information about their own, public record. They want more information about comps, what's going on in their neighborhood, market conditions, things like that. So we bring the RPR report. I also bring the MLS market analysis, which we're gonna do one next time, but that's right here, the CMA. And I also print it and I highlight on it and I write down things like, okay, this one had one less bathroom, but this one had nicer finishes, because a lot of times you want to be able to tell the story of why that house sold for that amount. Maybe it was heavily staged. Maybe it, went in a day and there was nothing else on the market at the time. So this is right out of MLS. You can create this in MLS for free. And it's really, really helpful to show you what comparable homes have sold for and their information compared to your subject property. Again, we'll dive into how to do CMAs and price a listing next time. And remember, I do not include these in my pre-listing packet that I drop off. The contract, the residential listing contract. Remember, we fill this out before the appointment a little bit and leave certain areas blank and highlight the areas that we plan to fill out in the appointment. So I fill out the marketing info, I fill out the commission information, they just need to circle one, and the items that I highlight are always going to be the included in list price, because I want to go over in the appointment what they plan to include and what they don't. We talk about fixtures. Hey, if you have a TV in the home and it's mounted, you need to leave the mount, but you get to take the TV. And sometimes they'll say, you know what, just leave the TV. So we'll include the TV, just depends. A lot of people find it easier just to leave a TV than to take it down. But it begins those conversations. I always check the agency box myself right away because there's no need to have a conversation surrounding that. So checkbox 113, remember that's multiple representation with designated agency, saying that, and we talked about this contract last time too, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but it talks about how the same firm can represent both the listing agent and the buyer agent, but each seller, the seller and the buyer, each have their own designated agent. So that's really what that means. Because obviously I'm going to share this listing with my colleagues, and very likely the person to bring a buyer might be from my firm. So we want to make sure that that's able to happen. We usually check email. We have them write their email. You may know it already. And this is the field that I keep highlighted because in this listing appointment, we are walking away with a signed contract. Even if you're saying term of the contract begins 6 months from now, we got a signed contract. And there's something psychological about a seller signing something that makes them feel like you're going to go get started now. We also don't want you to have to do a bunch of work on something that you don't have an actual listing contract for, right? Because you're going to start preparing and getting ready and contacting people and scheduling your sign and your photos and possibly staging. And you don't want to have to do that if you don't even know if you've got the listing. So you get the contract signed in that appointment. Line 311, term of the contract, that date is the date it goes live in MLS. Meaning by that date, you need to have photos done, staging done, everything needs to be ready to go. You can put it in delayed status, and that's still an active listing contract. You do need to have your active listing contract having had begun in order to put it in delayed status. Delayed status means the photos are up on MLS, signs in the yard, but there are no showings yet. You can do that up to 21 days in MLS. It's kind of like a way to get people excited about the listing. I usually like to do delayed status for a few days, maximum a week. I feel 21 days is too long. Sometimes people forget about it or forget they scheduled a showing in 3 weeks. By then they might have found something already. So it's only really necessary if the seller really, really, really wants to get it in, but maybe they have a little work to do in the basement or something like that, and they just want to get that done. But it buys them some time. So you'll choose that date. And I always remind the seller, if things are not progressing quickly enough and we need to push this date back, we absolutely can. But this allows us to begin getting started and working for you. Also, mind you, if they go and sell the house outside of the dates of this contract, you are not owed a commission. So if today is June 28th and we sign this today to begin listing on July 28th, so a month out, the 28th day of July 2022, and they go sell it in the next week, technically you're not in a listing contract yet. It had not begun. You also cannot put the listing in MLS if this date has not started yet. You will get a big fine. So we always want to make sure that this date matches the date you put it in MLS. And of course, I'm going to be with you as you do these your first time, but just know that that date's really important. And then if you choose 28th day of July, they can sign it, date it today, because they're signed. You want to date it the date that they're signing. Don't worry about the date that the listing goes live. They're signing it today, and then you're going to sign it as well as the agent down here. If the seller is an entity like an LLC, they'd put that information here. So always get it ready, populated with their address information and everything like that, so you're not handwriting it in the appointment. So you want this already filled out when you get there. You obviously know the address already because you're going there. So you want to make sure to fill that out as much as you can. I also do like to fill out the other documents that they're signing, because it just is one less thing they have to worry about. So in here as well, we've got the listing contract, we've got the real estate condition report. Just fill out the top of this for them. I always let them know, like, this is the not so exciting stuff. It's you listing everything you know about the house. It's like 7 pages, a lot of yes, NA, no, but just know that we cannot guide you on how to fill this out. We cannot tell you that you can say this or can't say this. We can't give advice on that. If any seller has a question on how to answer something, they have to ask a real estate attorney, because the answer can change based on what they find is important to disclose or not. There's 2 schools of thought. If, let's say, water leaked through the roof last year, but it's since been fixed, the roof has been patched and it's all not there anymore. They fixed the drywall, you'd never know. They might ask you, do I disclose that then? That I am aware of roof leaks? Do not touch that answer. You cannot answer that question because maybe, maybe not. But I would ask an attorney, what are the implications if I did? My advice is always over disclose, right? You can always say, yes, I'm aware. And then in the notes, it always, anytime you have an answer that's a yes, like, yes, I am aware of this type of defect, give an explanation. Roof leaked last year. We have since patched the roof, fixed the drywall, all moisture has been cleaned up, no further damage. I always recommend over disclosing, I just say that general term. I don't say anything specific. But the more a seller discloses, the more that buyer then feels like they can trust the seller. My thought is always, man, if they disclose that outlet in the garage hasn't worked since 1969, that tells me that they're very aware of what's going on in the house and there's not going to be any surprises, rather than just a bunch of no's. So just remember that every seller does need to fill out a real estate condition report. There is no seller who is exempt except like a personal representative who maybe inherited the house and has never lived there. But if it's a child selling their family home and they had lived there at one point, even when they were 5 years old and don't remember, they do have to fill one out because technically they have lived there. Now, if their attorney recommends they do not fill one out and to fill out this other form instead that they provide, that's fine. We're not attorneys, so we'll never go against an attorney's advice. Your license kind of stops at the advice point when it comes to how to fill these things out. They always need to go to an attorney then and figure that out. And trust me, it's hard because we want to help, but we don't want to put ourselves into a bad situation by helping where we shouldn't. Okay, we are able to practice a very limited form of law, even by being able to execute these contracts. In other states, attorneys need to look them over and approve them before they can go through. So we're really lucky that here in Wisconsin, we're able to execute our own documents, but it comes with a line that we cannot cross. Addendum S, lead-based paint disclosure, basically saying they know of no lead-based paint. Any house before 1978 requires this document. Notice to buyers and sellers, this is just a general CYA document. Don't wire money where you shouldn't. We recommend you, have an inspection. Your agent is not an inspector, an appraiser, a tax advisor, an accountant. So just a general notice about buyers and sellers. So we give this to all clients, no matter what. Certification of non-foreign status. This is something we use when we order title, just making sure that the seller is a US citizen, because there's certain taxes that may need to be paid if they are not. And those actually can get transferred to the buyer if it's not caught at the time of closing. So we want to make sure they fill that out. And then the seller information sheet. Always include this as well with your pre-listing packet, because if they fill it out beforehand and you show up and everything's filled out and they give you the documents, you're golden, you've got the listing. But it takes a lot of time to fill out this stuff out. So by getting it to them early enough, it helps them just get it out of the way. Keep in mind, even though they have it on paper, they absolutely can fill this stuff out online as well by just you sharing it with them through the transaction management system. So they don't need to fill it out on paper if they don't want to. So read the room, just know what your seller would prefer. Sometimes I ask, do you prefer to fill this out on paper? You can look it over, but if you want to fill it out all via e-signature and online, I'll share it with you after the appointment. You can go from there. And it's usually it's faster then too. This information is all required in order for us to order title and begin the listing process as well. So we do need their mortgage info, their social security number. We need to know if the home is in a trust. We need to know if they're legally able to even sell the home. Do they have a power of attorney? Do they have a HELOC, an equity line of credit? What's the loan information? We're going to pay off your mortgage before closing because, well, they get paid first before you do, and kind of going through all this stuff. And then it also has information about the actual listing. Do they have a survey? Is there a well? Is there a septic? HOA, ages of the appliances, all information that we need to know about their home. Okay, so this document is super important. This is kind of the meat and potatoes besides the listing contract of all the information that you need to know. Okay, super important. And that, my friends, is really the documents that you're going to be bringing to a listing appointment. So what I suggest is when you get yours done, you're going to want to create like one nice packet that you can just upload as a PDF and use over and over and over again. Okay, so your homework, and I'm gonna let you guys go a little early because I want to give you time to work on it. For next time, which we don't have class next week, but we have class again on the 12th, you're going to be sharing your pre-listing packet, how it was created, your design, your information. What it does is forces you to create something that you probably wouldn't create unless you were forced to. I wish someone had forced me to make some of this stuff before so that I had it, because when you graduate coaching and you're done with this class, you're going to have a really nice kind of packet of all the documents that you're going to need to practice real estate. And the pre-list packet and the listing packet itself is a big part of that. So in here as well, I have, these are the documents for the class that we're in right now. I'm going to put all the stuff that I had in there in here so you can grab it and use it as much as you want. Just customize it with your face, your information, your number, your email, all that. Okay, because we want you to go out there and be successful, and we want you to be able to not think about prepping your packet and taking 4 hours to do that. We want it to be super simple. Where you really want to spend a lot of your time is going to be researching comps, getting to know the neighborhood, and making sure you have a good plan set for that. Your packet itself should already be created and ready to go. Okay, so like I said, I will download this, upload it, and you can just take it and print as a PDF, all the documents, some of the documents, whatever you want. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Yes. Yep. I'm going to stop recording.